Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the meeting order and open roll call.
Goodell.
Here.
Slater.
Here.
Rusher.
Here.
Hader.
Here.
And we need a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We need a motion to approve the minutes of the September 23rd, 2013 regular council meeting.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We need a motion to approve the September treasurer's investment report.
Move approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we need a motion to approve the September claims, if there's no questions.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Under communications, anything from the public in attendance this evening? Under unfinished business, we have a request to place a cross in the right-of-way on 16th Avenue North by Deb Ruberg. We have Eric Eady tonight here to tell us probably why we shouldn't do that. So Eric?
Am I gonna lead off, is there
Yeah,
a, okay.
we've discussed it once already, so.
I was asked by Aaron, I guess, as a follow-up to the last meeting that you had, to kind of look into this from a legal standpoint. I think it's an area that we haven't addressed, certainly as a city, and frankly, I don't think many have formally. And I was able to do a lot of research. I think I got a pretty good concept on where this is. A little bit of factual background so you can kind of get the lay of the land. The street in question, the center line of the street serves as the northern boundary of the city limits. So you've got a street in question where the north side is under county jurisdiction and the south side is part of the city's street system. And there's a 2080 agreement as far as maintenance, but as far as the jurisdiction, it's split along the center line. And it's a little bit further complicated because the road in question isn't perfectly centered within the right of way. There's a curve, and so I think in anticipation of the curve, there's a little updrift in the road, and so it's not perfectly centered. And I think that was been developed a little bit in the lawsuit as I read about. I don't believe there's any formal easement or other dedication for the road in question that we can look at to see what the terms of that are. And I think in that context, then, the right-of-way portion on the south side is subject to basically your control as the city council. We don't have any formal permitting process for these memorials in the right-of-way. There's something that's kind of proliferated, across the whole country, quite frankly, and they're kind of an item of debate. I think in our case, somewhat fortunately, this particular, and I don't know exactly, how it was designed, but presumably it's just a cross of some kind, would fall under the definition of a sign under our new sign ordinance. And because of that, the general rule in our new sign ordinance is that there's no signs allowed in the public right-of-way. One of the exceptions would be if it's authorized by the council. And so I think that's where we're at tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of considerations that a council would go through in looking at something like this. Some of the obvious ones would be the safety concerns. Something placed in the public right-of-way could potentially be distracting, dangerous to the traveling public. You've also got maintenance issues. Is the public going to be expected to maintain that, or you can have private citizens, moving around in the right-of-way, parking their cars nearby. So there's the general safety aspects. There's also very strong First Amendment concerns in this particular case. If in fact we're using a cross to memorialize a site, there have been challenges on the First Amendment grounds, establishment of a religion, in the sense that if you approve a private placement of a religious symbol in the right-of-way, could violate that. I know it's never gone to the U.S. Supreme Court that I know of, but in the state of Utah, they used to honor their fallen highway patrolmen with crosses, and they were defeated on a federal circuit court in that case. So pretty ripe issue for a challenge. finally, you've got just a consideration, like any of your decisions, about the precedental impact on further applications for anything in the public right of way, not necessarily memorials, but any kind of structure, sign, whatever. And I think tonight, the way you should handle it is you kind of got a preliminary decision, and that is whether you even want to entertain this. I mean, if you want, I mean, I think as it stands right now, under the public right of way, you certainly have the authority, and the general rule would be that nothing's permitted. And in light of what has been presented to you, do you want to entertain this? And by entertaining that, I mean, you'd say yes, and we're going to ask the applicant then to go to the next step, which would be to follow the formal application process under the sign ordinance. So there's detail about where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, specifics. So I think you've got that initial decision here to make as a council. Do you want to go that far, or do you just feel that under the facts as presented, you're not interested in allowing this particular memorial, in this case, in the public right of way? And again, I think the alternative would be maybe we need more facts, which could be developed through an application process. Because obviously, the safety concerns in general are very specific, where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, how big it's going to be, what it's going to be made of, how it's anchored, and it's all sorts of questions that would lead into that. So kind of a general question, and then specific if you'd like to go there.
Question for Eric?
I don't believe so. I know we ran into a problem, Eric, down on South 8th Street with a sign. Why we changed our sign ordinance about putting a sign in a public right of way or even on private property, because it was offending a neighbor or whatever, and geez, that thing made it to Washington DC. I don't want to sound, unsympathetic or I understand it. Family had a great loss, but I just think we open up a big can of worms if somebody was to have an accident on South 5th Street and 5th Avenue, and somebody wants to put a memorial up there. What do we say if we allow it on a right-of-way here? I think we're opening up a big can of worms that could have turn into a mess down the road.
Yeah, it's seems to be nationwide. That seems to be the issue. I don't know if you mentioned it, but also just the issue of if somebody decides to hold a memorial service there, and then there's an accident. So are we encouraging that type of activity? And from what little research I saw, that seems to be one of the key issues. Is do you allow, and I saw some things online that I think are much more extensive than this, where they had solar lights and even, kind of I don't know what to call it, an altar, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of a whole thing set up there. And then you get into, and I don't think this would be an issue here, but like mowing and maintenance and things. So, and just overall, I mean, is that the place, along a right of way where you want to have people stopping and it's just, it seems to be the government's, what I saw is the government is sort of choosing to not do that. What is it, Oregon and Colorado, I think, are two states that have kind of a generic sign that will just be put out.
Oh, as an alternative,
Yeah.
Memorials, yeah.
There's a memorial that the state has. Iowa hasn't adopted that, so that might be a way for the Rubergs to go if they want to pursue it any further. Go to the state and, where there has been accidents like that, possibly there'd just be, and of course it's non-denominational, so that would be, I think, an alternative.
Any other comments? So we take,
Well, I guess I would make a motion that we don't pursue it any further at this point, until maybe the law changes or the state legislature or somebody comes up with something different for us. I just think we're opening I just think it could turn into a mess before it's all said and done. And I don't mean to be unsympathetic at all, I understand the parents' grief, but I just don't think we should do it. I would make that into a motion.
Second?
We have a motion on the table, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? This is where we stand anyway, so. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rick. Under new business, discuss a new Chamber of Commerce Administrative Assistant position for the city of Humboldt. Aaron.
The park board and chamber have decided to part ways on the combined chamber recreation position due to the inability to make the position functional. The amount of hours needed to complete the work required by the position was making the position unworkable. Honestly, this was a recommendation of myself, probably, looking like a little over 2 years ago, is when we combined the positions. And, I think Susan's done a great job in the interim over the 2 years. She's, between the 150th and, all the events that the chamber holds, and then the recreation programs and the demands of the recreation program. She's very hands-on, not to mention all the pool issues we've had. She's done a great job in that role, but I think the structure is such that it's just, there's so many constraints, or so many demands on the time that anybody we put in that role is likely to burn out after. I'm surprised she lasted 2 years in it. We've been talking about it for a long time as far as just how difficult it is. It's well over 40. We're talking probably closer to 60 to 80 on most weeks. Just the amount of time that she's interacting with parents and scheduling and registration and after hours events and whatnot for the chamber events. So after discussing that in the park board and in the chamber board, it just seems like it makes sense to kind of part ways, which is unfortunate because it was really a good scenario for the chamber to be able to retain somebody for a longer term. They had several 1 year and many 6-month stints in the chamber. But the direction they're heading now is to an administrative assistant position rather than a director position, where the board is actually going to try and take on championing several events. Each event will be championed by one board member to make sure that it comes to fruition, and the administrative assistant will act more as a support staff as far as answering phones and directing calls and invoices and things along those lines. Kind of changing the way it functions a little bit. But they're requesting that the city act in the same capacity that it acts with HCDA, where HCDA is responsible for everything that deals with Alyssa's employment, but the city acts as kind of the payroll pass-through for that person. And so Alyssa's an employee of the city, but she's still directed by Humboldt County Development Association. So if council's all right with that, then I'll continue to proceed to work with the chamber in that capacity and make that happen.
As of now, Susan is still doing both jobs, or she is just?
She,
will continue until we get someone, or
we
who?
told her she had to stay on forever. No, she is staying for an indefinite amount of time until so that there's a seamless transition, and so that whoever comes in the chamber role can be kind of coached up on what's going on and what to look out for and where everything is, and get them comfortable in the position. So there isn't the big drop off that's happened after every other chamber director. A lot of times they're not around, or they're busy with something else, and so they can't really give that handoff from one person to the next. Talking with Jeff Goodell and several of the other past presidents have experienced real difficulties, and they try and take over the roles, and then it doesn't really work that well. So I think this is the best way. Ideally, by January 1, she would be completely transitioned over to just rec director, and that's a period where you've got a quarter you can cut off at, and so it just makes sense at that point. Whether or not we get there, that's another thing, but I think January 1 is probably the likely scenario.
She'll advertise for that position, and then
Yes.
you would actually do all that stuff then to get in the chamber director then?
Yes, Chamber is already working on trying to figure out how to advertise it and what sort of description they want and what duties should be included in it. It's just a matter of how to handle the payroll, because payroll is, especially for a part-time position by itself, is just exorbitantly expensive to process it when you've only got 20 hours of somebody actually on staff time, so it just makes sense.
But her salary will be paid for, this person's salary will be paid for by the
It'll
chamber.
be the chamber, yeah.
We're just being the in-between person,
Yep.
taking care of salary and stuff, payroll.
Yep.
Good. No, we tried.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so, you know,
I mean,
can't fault you, you know, we can't fault us for that, for trying to save money and, you know, being positioned with and stuff anyway, so.
I think there was 2 years of good continuity there, and it's just a matter of, you know, I think the demands were just too high to continue to ask her to go on in that role with both roles combined. So that's kind of where we ended up with this. I guess that the downside is that now that the roles won't be combined, that you'll have there'll be the 20,000 that was previously being paid for by the chamber that won't be paid for. So that'll affect the budget a little bit as far as that, but it's still, I think it'll be more than enough hours for one person to justify the payroll, so.
Chamber director will be back in the front office then, or where would it
Yeah,
change?
we'll shuffle them around, put them back up front, change that room back around, and get them in there.
Make a motion for that? A motion.
Do we have a motion to have Aaron start looking for a new chamber director and as a pass-through from the city?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next under new business, discuss sidewalk on Wildcat Road constructed with LMI funding.
Superintendent Darling requested that the city add a sidewalk on Wildcat Road from the school property to Forest Boulevard. This is the section between, kind of next to the subsidized apartments there, between the gazebo and then Forest Boulevard where the trailer park is there. And that section is currently resembles a county road, even though it's a city road. Big ditches, not a whole lot of shoulder on the side there. And Superintendent Darling's comment was that the students tend to walk because it's close enough to walk from Elmhurst and Forest and that area, and walk down Wildcat Road to the school. And at the school grounds, there's a path that goes back through there so they can get off the road.